Hey guys, tonight we travel to the bottom of the world, to a place that shouldn't exist, a continent frozen in time, a vast white desert twice the size of Australia, holding nearly all the world's fresh water locked away in a sheet of ice miles thick. This is Antarctica, a land of brutal beauty and profound silence. And in that silence, secrets have a way of growing. Tonight, we'll journey across this landscape of illusion, where satellite eyes see impossible things. Pyramids that rival Giza's, strange doorways carved into mountainsides, and the faint tracks of something that crashed and slid for miles across the ice. We'll drill down, far below the surface, to discover a lost world of fossilized rainforests and vast hidden lakes that haven't seen the sun in 15 million years. It's a place where the line between scientific discovery and outlandish myth becomes hopelessly blurred. Frankly, it's a continent so extreme, you almost certainly wouldn't survive your first 24 hours there without a massive support team. So exploring it from bed is probably the wisest choice you'll make all day. So, as you settle in, if you appreciate these journeys into the strange and forgotten, a quiet tap on the like and subscribe buttons is always welcome. As always, the visuals are just here to set the mood. You can close your eyes and let the story guide you. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, perhaps pull the covers up a little higher, and let's begin our descent into the world's last great mystery. You are flying over it now. Below you, there is nothing but white. A blinding, searing white that stretches to a curved horizon, broken only by the sharp, blue-black shadows of mountains that claw their way through the ice. This is the Great Antarctic Polar Plateau, the coldest, driest, and highest desert on Earth. The air outside your imaginary window is thin and so frigid it would freeze your lungs solid in a few breaths. There are no trees, no rivers, no signs of familiar life. The silence here is a physical presence, a pressure on the ears. It's a silence so absolute that early explorers wrote of hearing the blood moving in their own veins. This continent is an alien world on our own planet. It holds 90% of Earth's ice, a staggering volume that, if it were to melt, would raise global sea levels by over 200 feet. Yet paradoxically, it receives less precipitation than the Sahara. It is a desert made of frozen water. This is the first of Antarctica's many contradictions. It is a land that preserves the past with perfect fidelity. Trapped in its ice cores are tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere, a library of Earth's climate going back over 1 million years. But this same blank canvas, this vast emptiness, invites us to project our own stories onto it. It has become a repository for modern myths, a place where our anxieties and our wildest speculations can take root. Humanity's official relationship with this place is relatively new. The heroic age of Antarctic exploration, defined by figures like Roald Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott, racing to the South Pole in 1911, was a brutal contest of endurance against an unforgiving environment. They sought glory, scientific knowledge, and the simple, stark achievement of being first. They found a landscape of profound hardship, a place that seemed actively hostile to human life. But even then, they found anomalies. Scott's doomed expedition famously discovered fossilized leaves near the Beardmore Glacier, the first definitive proof that this ice-bound world was once green and teeming with life. The continent itself is not static. It breathes. Scientists have discovered that the immense weight of the ice sheet, which can be nearly 3 miles thick in places, causes it to rise and fall with the gravitational pull of the moon. It's a slow, planetary tide, an imperceptible pulse that reminds you this is not a dead place, but a dynamic, living system we barely understand. And with every year, our technology allows us to see it in greater detail. Satellites map its surface with incredible precision, and ground-penetrating radar peers through the ice, revealing the ghost topography of the continent beneath. This is where the story splits. For every scientific team drilling for ice cores, there is an online researcher poring over satellite images, looking for patterns that don't fit. Is Antarctica simply a magnificent natural archive? Or does its ice conceal something far more profound, something intentionally hidden? Is it a record of Earth's climate, or a tomb for a forgotten chapter of history? It's a land so vast and uniform that the mind can play tricks on you. The phenomenon is called pareidolia, the tendency to see patterns in random data, faces in clouds, or perhaps structures in the snow. But what happens when those patterns seem too perfect, too geometric, to be a trick of the light? What happens when the ice, sculpted by nothing but wind and time, begins to look like the work of intelligent hands? The first and most famous of these anomalies is a shape so iconic it sent a shock wave of speculation across the globe. A perfect, four-sided peak. A pyramid sitting in the middle of nowhere. As your imaginary craft continues its silent glide, the endless expanse of the polar plateau gives way to something new. Jagged peaks begin to tear through the ice sheet, a mountain range of staggering scale, completely entombed in ice, save for its highest summits. This is the Ellsworth Mountain Range, home to Mount Vinson, the highest point on the continent. And nestled within this remote, frozen spine of the world is the anomaly that caught the internet's collective breath in 2016. On your screen, a satellite image resolves into focus. There, standing starkly against the ice, is a mountain. But it's not just any mountain. It's a near-perfect, four-sided pyramid. Its faces are shockingly flat, its ridges sharp and defined, converging to a distinct point. Standing around 4,150 feet tall from its visible base, its silhouette is uncannily familiar. It looks, for all the world, like one of the great pyramids of Giza, transplanted from the Egyptian desert and dropped into the heart of the Antarctic ice. The image went viral, and the question was immediate and obvious. What is that? And who or what could have built it? The location itself adds to the mystery. This isn't a place you can just visit. It's hundreds of miles from the nearest research station, in a region battered by ferocious katabatic winds that can reach speeds of nearly 200 miles per hour. Getting a team there to investigate would be a monumental undertaking. Good luck getting a permit to bring a shovel, let alone a full archaeological team. Geologists, of course, were quick to offer an explanation, one grounded in the patient and powerful forces of nature. They identify the structure as a nunatak. It's a wonderful word, borrowed from the Greenlandic language, meaning an isolated peak of rock projecting above a sheet of ice or snow. The continent is covered in them. The idea is that the main body of the mountain is buried deep beneath the ice, and we are only seeing its very tip. Over millions of years, this exposed rock is subjected to an intense form of erosion called freeze-thaw weathering. Water seeps into cracks in the rock. As it freezes, it expands with incredible force, wedging the cracks wider. Over and over, season after season, this process acts like a chisel, breaking off shards and slabs of rock. Combine this with the relentless scouring of those katabatic winds, which carry ice crystals that act like a fine grit sandpaper, and you have a powerful sculpting process. Geologists argue that if a mountain has natural planes of weakness or joints within its rock structure, this erosion can exploit those planes, potentially carving out one or two flat-looking faces. A historical fact often overlooked in the excitement is that the rocks of the Ellsworth Mountains are ancient, part of a crustal block that was once attached to North America before tectonic forces rafted it to its current position. Their internal structure is complex, forged by immense pressures and heat long ago. But here is where the official explanation begins to feel, for some, a little thin. While nunataks are common and freeze-thaw erosion is a well-understood process, they very rarely produce a form with such startling geometric symmetry. One or two flat faces is one thing, but four near-uniform triangular faces rising to a sharp central peak? That requires a remarkable coincidence of geology and weather. Nature, it seems, is an exceptionally gifted architect, or perhaps it had a little help. Scientists would tell you that given enough time and enough mountains, a statistical anomaly like this is bound to occur. But that doesn't quell the sense of wonder or suspicion, and it might not be alone. Once you start looking, you start seeing them. Alternative researchers and online sleuths claim to have found other, similar pyramid-like shapes across the continent in satellite imagery, some partially buried, some more heavily eroded. The idea of a single, accidental pyramid is one thing, but the suggestion of multiple structures, perhaps forming a complex, pushes the theory into a completely different realm. While the scientific consensus leans heavily toward a natural formation, the debate continues to simmer about whether nature alone can achieve such architectural precision. The pyramid of the Ellsworth Mountains remains an icon of Antarctic mystery, a perfect example of something that is almost certainly natural, but looks so profoundly artificial that you can't help but wonder. It forces you to question what you're seeing. Is it a mountain or a monument? Is it geology or geometry? And it serves as a gateway to even stranger sights, because once you start scanning the satellite maps of this vast white continent, you realize the pyramid isn't the only thing that doesn't quite belong. You begin to see other shapes, other patterns that defy easy explanation. Leaving the pyramid behind, your perspective shifts. You are no longer a passenger on an imaginary flight, but an observer from orbit, your view provided by the unblinking eye of a satellite. The continent below is a mosaic of high-resolution images stitched together to form a seamless map. You can zoom in on any point, exploring crevasses, glaciers, and vast, featureless plains of snow. It is in this digital realm, this Google Earth exploration of the last frontier, that the next set of anomalies appear. And these are, in some ways, even more unsettling than the pyramid. Your cursor drifts over the vast expanse of East Antarctica, a region even more remote and less explored than the West. You zoom in on a rocky outcrop, a stretch of dark stone exposed against the brilliant white of the ice. And there it is. Carved into the side of a cliff face is what looks, for all the world, like a doorway. It's a perfect rectangle, a dark void in the rock, with clean, straight edges and sharp, 90-degree corners. It looks manufactured. It looks like an entrance. The scale is difficult to determine from the image alone, but it appears large, perhaps dozens of feet high. A few clicks away, you find another. And another. Some are single, stark rectangles. Others appear as part of a larger complex with what look like steps or platforms leading up to them. Glaciologists and geologists again step forward with calm, rational explanations. The doorways they suggest, are likely natural formations. They could be sections of a rock face that have calved off in a clean, rectangular block, a phenomenon that can occur in certain types of stratified or jointed rock. Another theory is that they are simply caves or voids, and the sharp, geometric appearance is an illusion created by a combination of shadow, perspective, and the low resolution of the satellite image. They point out that a straight-on view might reveal a much more irregular shape. They also suggest a process called wind scouring, where the relentless katabatic winds, armed with ice particles, can carve out hollows in the rock. If the wind is predominantly from one direction, it could, in theory, create a somewhat regular-looking opening. The staircase, they argue, is likely a geological feature known as layered strata. Rock is often laid down in horizontal layers over millions of years. If this block of rock is later tilted by tectonic forces and then exposed to erosion, the different layers might erode at different rates, creating a natural step-like pattern. It's a plausible and scientifically sound explanation, but it doesn't entirely satisfy the feeling of unease that the images provoke. The sheer crispness of the lines in some of these doorways is hard to reconcile with the chaotic forces of erosion. A quirky detail that fuels the mystery is the transient nature of these anomalies. Researchers who track these specific locations report that the features can appear and disappear. A doorway visible one year might be completely covered by snow and ice the next, only to reappear years later. This is explained by shifting snow drifts and the cycles of summer melt and winter refreeze. But to a suspicious mind, it feels like something is being deliberately concealed and revealed. It adds to the narrative of a living, breathing secret. The scholarly debate here is less about was it aliens, and more about the limits of our perception. Scientists argue that we are hardwired to see patterns, particularly faces and geometric shapes, where none exist. This cognitive bias, pareidolia, is a powerful force. But others counter that, dismissing every single anomaly as a trick of the eye or a geological coincidence is its own form of bias, a refusal to consider possibilities outside the accepted framework. Historians of science might point out that many great discoveries began with an observation that didn't fit the existing model. Think of Alfred Wegener and continental drift. The idea was ridiculed for decades because no one could imagine a force powerful enough to move continents. Your journey takes you back in time to the harrowing expedition of Captain Robert Falcon Scott in 1912. After reaching the South Pole only to find the Norwegian flag already there, his team faced a desperate, tragic return journey. Exhausted, frostbitten, and starving, they still made a point to stop and collect geological samples. On the moraines alongside the massive Beardmore Glacier, they found something extraordinary: 35 pounds of rock containing the fossilized impressions of leaves. They were from a plant called Glossopteris, a type of seed fern. Even in their final days, they understood the profound importance of this discovery. They lugged those rocks with them until the very end, and the samples were found with their bodies months later. It was the first undeniable proof that this continent of ice was once covered in forests. Now, imagine standing in that same spot, but 100 million years ago. The air is warm and humid, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The temperature hovers around a comfortable 15 degrees Celsius, or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Instead of the crushing roar of the wind, you hear the buzzing of insects and the calls of strange, prehistoric birds. You are standing in a temperate rainforest. Towering above you are trees similar to the southern beaches you might find in modern-day Chile or New Zealand. The ground is a carpet of ferns, mosses, and liverworts. Dinosaurs, both large and small, move through the undergrowth. This isn't science fiction. This is the world that scientific evidence is painstakingly reconstructing, and the discoveries have only gotten more vivid since Scott's time. On Alexander Island, a large island off the Antarctic peninsula, paleontologists have found entire fossil forests, not just scattered leaves, but petrified tree stumps, some 3 feet across, still standing upright in the very positions they grew in. You can literally walk through the ghostly remains of a forest that was flash frozen by geological time. It's one thing to imagine a green Antarctica. It's another to see the direct, physical evidence of it, a silent testament to a world turned upside down. This wasn't a brief warm spell. This lush environment thrived for tens of millions of years when Antarctica was part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Even after it broke away and drifted south, it remained relatively warm for a long time. Scientists drilled deep into the seabed around the continent, pulling up long cores of sediment that act like time capsules. In these cores, they find ancient pollen and spores, microscopic clues that paint an even more detailed picture of this lost world. The pollen record from a site off the Antarctic Peninsula shows that as recently as 12 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs were gone, the coastline was still covered in a kind of tundra similar to the modern Arctic. The great ice sheets that define the continent today only began to take their permanent hold around 14 million years ago, sealing that green world away. This, of course, raises a fascinating and for some an irresistible question. If Antarctica was habitable for so long, could a civilization have existed there? The film you're imagining in your mind right now might flash to this very idea. Could the pyramids and doorways be relics from this temperate past? Here, mainstream science and speculative history diverge sharply. The timelines simply don't match up. The established fossil record shows that our species Homo sapiens only evolved around 300,000 years ago in Africa. By that time, Antarctica had already been locked in deep freeze for over 10 million years. There is, according to all available evidence, no overlap. Yet whispers and rumors persist. There are unverified reports, for example, of an amphitheater-like stone complex spotted in an aerial photograph near the Doubleday Glacier. Much like the doorways, it remains a piece of anecdotal evidence unconfirmed and unreviewed by any formal scientific body. It's a ghost of a story, a fringe tidbit that keeps the idea of a lost civilization alive. It highlights the ongoing tension between what is proven and what is possible. Geologists and paleontologists have given us a scientifically rigorous vision of a green Antarctica, a world of ancient trees and primeval swamps. But this very real lost world provides the perfect fertile ground for another more mythic story to grow. A story of forgotten people, advanced knowledge, and ancient maps. You now find yourself in a dimly lit wood-paneled room. The air smells of old paper and leather. Before you, spread out on a large table, is a map. It's drawn on a piece of gazelle skin, the ink faded by centuries, the coastlines rendered with a surprising, almost modern accuracy. This is the Piri Reis map, a genuine historical artifact drafted in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, or Piri Reis. And for some, it is the single most compelling piece of evidence that our understanding of history is fundamentally wrong. The map is a known historical fact. It was compiled from a variety of older source maps, some of which Piri Reis noted in his inscriptions dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. It is what's known as a portolan chart, focusing on coastlines, ports, and navigational features. It depicts the Atlantic Ocean with remarkable precision, for its time showing the coasts of Europe, North Africa, and the newly discovered coast of Brazil. But it's the bottom edge of the map that has sparked a century of intense debate. There, stretching eastward from the southern tip of South America, is a landmass, a southern continent, a landmass that proponents argue bears a striking resemblance to the coast of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. But there's a catch. The coastline on the map is depicted completely free of ice. This is where historian Charles Hapgood enters the story. In his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea, King's Hapgood put forward a radical theory. He argued that the Piri Reis map and others like it were not the product of 16th century exploration, but copies of much, much older source maps. These original maps, he proposed, were created by a highly advanced, as yet unknown ancient civilization that possessed a sophisticated understanding of cartography and global geography. This civilization, Hapgood theorized, charted the entire globe thousands of years ago, including the coastline of Antarctica, at a time before it was covered by its current ice sheet. The idea is electrifying. It suggests a lost chapter of human history, a golden age of knowledge that was wiped out by some global catastrophe, leaving behind only these faint cartographic echoes. The map in this view is a message in a bottle from a forgotten world. However, mainstream scholars and cartographic historians offer a much more mundane, though equally fascinating explanation. They argue that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map is not Antarctica at all. Instead, it's most likely a distorted representation of the South American coastline, which the cartographer simply bent eastward to fit onto the parchment. Another possibility is that it represents the era's prevailing belief in Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, a massive imaginary continent that geographers since the time of Ptolemy believed must exist to balance the land masses of the northern hemisphere. The debate over the map's interpretation is a classic scholarly puzzle. Mainstream historians point to numerous errors and inconsistencies in the southern landmass that don't match Antarctica, while Hapgood's supporters argue that these are simply copyist errors or distortions caused by the map's projection. One of the more compelling arguments against the Antarctic theory is that the map includes features like serpents and other mythical creatures in the southern land, typical of the speculative cartography of the era. To explain how Antarctica could have been ice-free for ancient cartographers to map it, Hapgood invoked a controversial geological theory known as crustal displacement, or true polar wander. The idea, which he developed with the encouragement of none other than Albert Einstein, is that the entire outer crust of the Earth can sometimes shift in one piece over the softer mantle below, like the skin of an orange slipping over the fruit. A sudden rapid shift of this kind could move a continent like Antarctica away from the pole and into a warmer climate in a geological instant, melting the ice sheets. Conversely, it could also move a temperate landmass to a polar region, freezing it over. While the concept of true polar wander is a real and studied phenomenon in geology, the scientific consensus is that it happens incredibly slowly over many millions of years, not as a sudden cataclysmic event that could occur within the time frame of human civilization. The dramatic recent shifts proposed by Hapgood and others remain firmly in the realm of fringe science. Yet the idea holds a powerful allure. It provides a mechanism for rapid world-altering change. This narrative thread is amplified by the prophecies of the American psychic Edgar Cayce, who in the 1930s predicted that the poles would shift and that a thawing Antarctica would reveal new lands and become a center of spiritual awakening. So you are left with this enigmatic piece of parchment. Is the Piri Reis map a masterpiece of 16th century compilation, a fascinating glimpse into the age of discovery and its geographical myths? Or is it a ghost, a copy of a copy, a scientific document from a civilization we have no other record of? It represents a fork in the road of history. One path leads to a familiar story of gradual exploration and mapping. The other leads to a forgotten world of ancient sea kings, sudden cataclysms, and a continent of ice that holds the memory of a warmer charted past. But while we debate what might be drawn on ancient maps, modern science has been charting a new map of Antarctica, not of its surface, but of what lies beneath. And it is, in its own way, just as strange and unexpected as any ancient chart. Your view now plunges downwards through the ice. The surface world of blinding white and howling wind dissolves into a deep compressed blue. You are sinking through a solid ocean, a vertical journey through time. Each layer of ice you pass through is a frozen record of a winter long past. 1,000 feet down, you're looking at ice that fell as snow when the Roman Empire was at its peak. A mile down, and the ice around you is from the last ice age when mammoths still roamed the earth. You keep going deeper and deeper until you are more than 2 miles beneath the surface. The pressure is immense, hundreds of times greater than at sea level. And then you break through. You are floating in total absolute darkness. You have arrived in one of the most alien environments on our planet, a subglacial lake. Below the vast Antarctic ice sheet, hidden from the world for millions of years, lies a continent of liquid water. This isn't just a handful of isolated ponds. It's a massive interconnected hydrological system of over 400 known lakes, linked by rivers and streams that flow in the dark carving channels into the bedrock beneath the ice. It's a vast hidden wetland, a secret world governed by pressure, geothermal heat, and the slow, grinding movement of the ice above. The existence of these lakes was first proposed in the late 19th century, a theoretical idea based on the principles of physics. Scientists understood that the immense pressure of the ice sheet would lower the freezing point of water at its base. Combine that with the faint warmth radiating up from the Earth's crust, geothermal heat, and it was logical to assume that in some places the base of the ice would be melted. But it remained a theory until the 1960s and 70s, when airborne radar surveys first detected the telltale flat reflective surfaces of liquid water deep beneath the ice. The jewel in the crown of this hidden water world is Lake Vostok. It is one of the largest lakes on Earth by volume comparable in surface area to Lake Ontario, yet it is buried under 4,000 meters, nearly 2.5 miles of solid ice. For somewhere between 15 and 25 million years, its waters have been completely sealed off from the atmosphere, from sunlight, and from the rest of the planet's biosphere. It is a time capsule of an ancient world. The water within it is incredibly old and thought to be supersaturated with oxygen forced into the liquid by the immense pressure of the overlying ice. For decades, scientists debated whether to breach this pristine environment. The potential for discovery was enormous. Could life exist in such an extreme place? If so, it would be a form of life completely isolated from the rest of Earth's evolution for millions of years. But the risks were equally great. How could you drill through 2.5 miles of ice without contaminating the ancient lake with modern microbes from the surface or with the fluids used in the drilling process? It was a profound ethical and scientific dilemma. After years of planning and slow, careful drilling, a Russian team at Vostok Station finally breached the lake in 2012. The moment was hailed as a monumental achievement in exploration comparable to the first landing on the moon. However, the initial samples were inconclusive. The water that surged up the borehole mixed with the kerosene-based drilling fluid used to keep it from freezing, making it incredibly difficult to determine if any microbes found were native to the lake or were simply contaminants from the drilling process. It was a frustratingly ambiguous result to a decades-long quest. While Vostok remains the most famous, it's far from the only subglacial lake. The exploration of this hidden realm has just begun. Other more accessible lakes are now being studied. At Lake Willans, a much shallower subglacial lake, scientists successfully drilled into it in 2013 and found unequivocally a thriving microbial ecosystem. They discovered a community of microorganisms that were not just surviving, but actively growing and metabolizing in the perpetual dark. These are not just dormant spores waiting to be reawakened. This is a functioning ecosystem. These creatures, known as chemotrophs, don't get their energy from sunlight like plants do. Instead, they derive it from chemical reactions, eating the minerals in the rock dust ground up by the glacier above them. This discovery fundamentally changed our understanding of where life can exist. It proved that sunlight is not a prerequisite for a complex ecosystem to flourish. All you need is liquid water, a source of energy, even a chemical one, and a handful of basic nutrients. The implications are profound, not just for Earth, but for our search for life elsewhere in the solar system. Moons like Jupiter's Europa and Saturn's Enceladus are thought to have massive liquid water oceans hidden beneath their icy shells. The subglacial lakes of Antarctica have become our primary analog, our practice ground, for exploring these distant ice-covered worlds. If life can thrive for millions of years in the dark beneath Antarctica's ice, why not beneath the ice of Europa? The hidden continent of water beneath the ice has opened up a new frontier, not just in geography, but in biology and the search for extraterrestrial life itself. You are now descending not in a craft, but in a scientific probe. A long, slender cylinder of sterilized metal, it melts its way down through the ice, leaving a clean tunnel behind it. Your target is Lake Mercer, another of the vast subglacial lakes buried under more than 1,000 meters of ice. This mission, which took place in 2019, was designed to avoid the contamination issues that plagued the Vostok drilling. The probe uses hot water to drill, and every piece of equipment is meticulously cleaned to ensure that no surface microbes are carried down into the pristine environment below. When the probe finally breaks through into the lake, it sends back data water samples, and most importantly, images. The water is cold, just above freezing, and the pressure is immense. There is no light. But as the probe's cameras pan across the lake bed, they reveal something astonishing. The bottom is not a barren, sterile wasteland of rock and mud. It is teeming with life. Not just the single-celled organisms found in Lake Willans, but a surprisingly diverse and dense ecosystem. The sediment cores brought back to the surface were found to contain the preserved remains of tiny animals, tardigrades, also known as water bears, and crustaceans, as well as the delicate tendrils of fungi. These creatures weren't living there now. but their presence in the sediment proves that the rivers and streams feeding this subglacial network were at some point in the last few thousand years connected to the open ocean. Life had found a way in, and then the ice had sealed the door behind it. But the most compelling discoveries are being made in the microbial realm. One of the most intriguing and lesser-known discoveries has been nicknamed Lake Enigma. This isn't an official name, but a descriptor used by researchers for a subglacial environment that yielded microbial samples of extraordinary complexity. When viewed under a microscope, these microbial communities weren't just scattered cells. They formed intricate multi-layered mats. Within these mats, the microbes organized themselves into complex, almost tree-like structures, with different species forming trunks, branches, and canopies, each occupying a specific niche in the chemical environment. It's a level of organization that hints at a sophisticated system of communication and cooperation between different types of microbes, a veritable city of microscopic life working together to survive in the dark. The existence of such organized ecosystems challenges our very definition of life. We tend to think of life in terms of individual organisms, but here, the entire microbial mat acts as a single superorganism. This discovery is a quirky but profound tidbit that rarely makes headlines, but is reshaping the field of microbiology. It suggests that in the absence of light and in the face of extreme pressure and low nutrients, life doesn't just survive. It innovates, creating complex social structures at a microscopic scale. This hidden world isn't confined to the lakes buried deep under the continental interior. In one of the most surprising discoveries of recent years, scientists explored what happens when an ice shelf collapses. Ice shelves are the massive floating extensions of glaciers that stretch out over the ocean. When one of them breaks away, like the Larsen B ice shelf did in 2002, it exposes a section of seafloor that has been covered by hundreds of meters of ice for thousands of years. It's an environment that has been completely cut off from the sun and from the rain of organic matter that typically feeds deep-sea ecosystems. The assumption was that these places would be biological deserts. The assumption was wrong. When remotely operated vehicles were sent down to explore the seafloor under the newly collapsed Filchner-Ronne ice shelf, they found a rich and vibrant community of creatures. They were 260 kilometers from the nearest open water in perpetual darkness. Yet the seafloor was populated by large corals, giant sea spiders, fish octopuses, and a bizarre variety of sponges, some of which were previously unknown to science. The scholarly debate is currently focused on how this ecosystem survives. The leading theory is that it is fed by a slow trickle of organic particles that are carried by ocean currents for hundreds of miles under the ice shelf from the open ocean. It's a lifeline so tenuous it shouldn't be able to support such a large and diverse community. Yet it does. This discovery pushes the boundaries of life even further. It shows that even in the most remote, lightless corners of our planet, life finds a way to cling on, to build complex communities against all odds. These ecosystems, both in the subglacial lakes and under the ice shelves, are like alien worlds on our own planet. They are governed by rules we are only just beginning to understand. They redefine the limits of life, showing us that the drive to exist is a force of incredible resilience and creativity. They are a testament to the fact that no matter how desolate and unforgiving a landscape may appear on the surface, beneath it, in the dark and under pressure, there can be a world of unexpected vitality. And sometimes, the evidence of these hidden chemical-rich water systems doesn't stay hidden. Sometimes it breaks through to the surface in the most dramatic and unsettling way possible. You are no longer in the dark. Your journey now takes you to the surface, to one of the strangest places in all of Antarctica, and perhaps on Earth, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. At first glance, the landscape is utterly wrong, while the rest of the continent is buried under miles of ice. This region is a vast frozen desert of barren ground gravel and exposed bedrock. It is one of the most extreme deserts in the world. The surrounding transantarctic mountains are so high that they block the flow of ice from the polar plateau, and the katabatic winds that roar down the slopes are so fierce and dry that they evaporate any snow or ice that tries to form. It's a landscape so alien that NASA uses it to test its Mars rovers. The valleys are eerily silent and profoundly empty. But as you traverse this Martian landscape, you come to the snout of a glacier, the Taylor Glacier. And from the pure white face of the ice, something is bleeding. A vivid crimson waterfall spills out from a crack in the glacier, staining the ice below a shocking rusty red. It looks like a wound in the pristine white landscape, a flow of gore from some massive dying creature trapped within the ice. This is Blood Falls. For decades after its discovery in 1911, its origin was a complete mystery. The first explorers thought the color came from some kind of red algae. The truth, when it was finally uncovered, was far more bizarre and far more interesting. The source of Blood Falls is a subglacial lake, but one very different from the vast freshwater bodies like Vostok or Mercer. This lake is a trapped remnant of an ancient fjord. Millions of years ago, the dry valleys were flooded by the sea. When the climate changed and the Taylor Glacier advanced, it sealed off a small body of that seawater, along with everything in it. For nearly 2 million years, this pocket of ancient ocean has been isolated from the outside world, trapped beneath the glacier, with no access to sunlight or oxygen. Over that immense span of time, the water has changed. As the glacier freezes, it rejects salt, so the trapped brine has become incredibly concentrated, 3 times saltier than the ocean. It's so salty that it can't freeze even at the frigid temperatures beneath the glacier. At the same time as the water was sealed off, any oxygen within it was used up. It became an anoxic environment. The microbes trapped in this dark, salty, oxygen-free prison had to find a new way to live, and they found it in the rock. The bedrock beneath the glacier is rich in iron. The microbes evolved to use sulfates in the water to breathe, and in the process, they metabolize the iron from the rock, releasing it into the brine. The trapped lake became a rich, soupy broth of salt and dissolved iron. Blood Falls is the moment this hidden ancient world meets our own. The pressure from the overlying glacier forces the brine out through a fissure. As this iron-rich anoxic water spills out into the open, it encounters oxygen in the atmosphere for the first time in 2 million years. The iron instantly oxidizes. It rusts. The vivid red color is not from algae or blood, but from simple, dramatic chemistry. It is literally a river of rust. This bizarre natural wonder has of course attracted its share of alternative theories. Some have speculated that the falls are a vent from some kind of artificial structure buried beneath the glacier, or that the heat required to keep the water liquid must come from a technological source. But the scientific explanation is in its own way even more magical. It provides a complete and compelling natural narrative that has profound implications. The ecosystem of extremophile microbes living in the brine of Blood Falls is a perfect model for how life might exist on other planets. Mars, for instance, is known to have vast reserves of subsurface ice and is rich in iron. If life ever existed, there it might have retreated to similar salty subglacial pockets, surviving in the dark, by eating rocks, just like the microbes of the Taylor Glacier. Bloodfalls is a window not just into Antarctica's past, but into the potential for life across the cosmos. The discovery and explanation of bloodfalls is a historical fact of modern science, a testament to how patient investigation can solve even the most baffling mysteries. Yet the image is so powerful, so unsettling, that it continues to fuel the imagination. It's a reminder that Antarctica is a place where the line between the natural and the supernatural can feel incredibly thin. It's a land of extremes, and such places have always been fertile ground for stories. Not just stories of science and geology, but stories of monsters, phantoms, and the strange tricks that the endless white and the profound isolation can play on the human mind. The silence of the dry valleys may be broken by the wind, but for some who have spent time there, it is also broken by other less explainable sounds. The stark scientific wonders of Antarctica, like the bleeding glacier and the hidden lakes, are in many ways stranger than fiction. But the human mind, especially when faced with extreme isolation and a monotonous alien landscape, has a tendency to populate the emptiness. Your journey now moves from the realm of the measurable into the world of lore legend and the unsettling whispers that drift across the ice. You are in the Southern Ocean, on the deck of a ship, navigating through a sea choked with icebergs. The water is a dark, forbidding gray-black, and the air is thick with a chilling mist. It is in these waters that sailors have reported sightings of the Ningen. The name is Japanese, meaning human. According to the stories, which are mostly modern, originating from Japanese whaling research vessels in the 1990s, the Ningen is an enormous pale white sea creature. It is described as being between 60 and 90 feet long, with a vaguely humanoid shape. It is said to have arms and sometimes legs and 5-fingered hands. Its face is indistinct, with only 2 large eyes and a mouth. The creature is almost exclusively seen at night, its pale form gliding eerily beneath the surface before disappearing into the depths. There are, of course, no clear photographs, only blurry images and shaky videos that are quickly dismissed as hoaxes or misidentified whales, giant squid, or even unusually shaped ice floes. But the consistency of the descriptions from different alleged witnesses has given the Ningen a persistent life in modern folklore, a new cryptid for the world's last wilderness. The Ningen is a modern myth, but the idea of colossal monsters in these southern waters is not. Legends of the Kraken. A gigantic cephalopod capable of pulling ships to their doom have been projected onto the Southern Ocean for centuries. And while a creature of that size is unlikely, the reality is almost as strange. The colossal squid, a creature distinct from the giant squid, lives in these waters. It is the largest invertebrate on Earth, and we know of its existence almost entirely from specimens found in the stomachs of sperm whales. We have almost never seen a living one in its natural habitat. It is a true sea monster, a real-life kraken, that remains almost completely unknown to science, a ghost of the deep. It's a humbling reminder that the ocean here is as unexplored as the continent itself. But the phantoms of Antarctica are not all confined to the sea. Some of the most compelling hauntings are psychological, born from the immense strain of survival. Your journey takes you back once more to the heroic age, to Sir Ernest Shackleton's legendary 1916 trans-Antarctic expedition. After his ship, the Endurance, was crushed by the ice, Shackleton and his crew made a desperate escape to Elephant Island. From there, Shackleton and 5 others set out in a small lifeboat, the James Caird, on an 800-mile journey across the most violent stretch of ocean on the planet to seek help from a whaling station on South Georgia Island. They made it, but their ordeal was not over. They had to cross the island's uncharted mountainous interior. For 36 hours, they marched exhausted and on the brink of collapse. During this trek, something strange happened. Shackleton and his 2 companions, Frank Worsley and Tom Crean, all later confessed independently that they had the distinct and persistent feeling that there was a 4th person marching with them. This presence was not frightening. It was comforting, a silent, helpful companion that seemed to sustain them on their journey. Shackleton wrote in his book, South, "It seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. This phenomenon became known as the third man factor, a psychological coping mechanism where the mind under extreme duress seems to generate a benevolent presence. It has since been reported by lone sailors, mountaineers, and even 9/11 survivors. It is a scientifically studied phenomenon, but that clinical explanation doesn't diminish the profound, almost spiritual experience reported by those who have felt it." Then, there are the classic ghost stories. The most famous is the apocryphal tale of the ghost ship Jenny. The story goes that in 1840, a whaling ship discovered the Jenny, a British schooner, drifting silently in the ice of the Drake Passage. When they boarded, they found the entire crew, frozen solid, preserved perfectly by the cold. The captain was found sitting at his desk in his cabin, a pen in his hand, his final log entry dated 17th January, 1823. It read, "No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive." The ship, according to the legend, had been a frozen tomb drifting for 17 years. While this story is almost certainly a piece of nautical fiction, it captures the romantic horror of the Antarctic, the idea of time itself freezing along with the men. Even in the modern scientific era, strange things persist. Researchers wintering over in the isolated huts of the dry valleys have reported hearing footsteps crunching on the gravel outside when no one is there. Tools going missing from locked workshops only to reappear in plain sight days later, and the unnerving feeling of being watched while out on the ice. Scientists attribute these experiences to the effects of extreme isolation, sensory deprivation, and the strange acoustics of the frozen landscape. But the stories persist, passed down from one generation of beaker folk, the slang for scientists, to the next, becoming part of the institutional lore. Antarctica, it seems, is a place that invites ghosts, whether they are from the sea, the mind, or the past. And it was this reputation as a remote, empty, and mysterious land that attracted the attention of a very different kind of explorer in the years leading up to the Second World War. The phantoms that haunted Shackleton were born of cold and exhaustion products of the mind pushed to its absolute limit. But as the 20th century marched on, a new and far more tangible specter began to cast its shadow over the ice. The era of gentlemen explorers planting flags for national pride was giving way to an age of strategic geopolitics. And in the late 1930s, the world's most remote continent attracted the attention of the world's most aggressive new power. Your journey now takes you to 1938. The world is holding its breath, teetering on the brink of a global conflict. In this atmosphere of rising tension, Germany launches a secretive and technologically advanced expedition to Antarctica. At its heart is the MS Schwabenland, a freighter refitted with a remarkable piece of hardware, a powerful steam catapult designed to launch massive Dornier Wall flying boats directly from its deck. This wasn't a mission of men hauling sledges. This was a modern aerial assault on the unknown. The official stated reason for the expedition was surprisingly mundane, almost comically practical. Germany was in the midst of its 4-year plan to achieve economic self-sufficiency, and one of the resources it lacked was fat. Fats were crucial, not just for food products like margarine, but as a key component in making glycerin for explosives. The primary source for industrial fats at the time was whale oil. By establishing a German whaling station in Antarctica, the Third Reich could secure its own supply and break the Norwegian monopoly. It turns out the initial drive for a secret Nazi lair was less about a mystical superweapon and more about ensuring a steady supply of sandwich spread. But the mission led by the veteran polar explorer, Captain Alfred Richer, went far beyond scouting for whaling grounds. Over several weeks, in early 1939, the 2 flying boats named Passat and Boreas flew relentless sorties over the unexplored territory inland from the coast. They mapped an enormous area over 600,000 square kilometers, taking more than 16,000 aerial photographs. And as they flew, they made their claim. The crew dropped thousands of small metal darts from the planes, each one about a foot long, and stamped with a swastika. It was a sort of high-altitude game of lawn darts, but for claiming a continent. The entire territory was named Neuschwabenland, or New Swabia, after the region of Germany where the ship's company was from. This much is established historical fact. Germany did mount a sophisticated expedition, they did map a large territory, and they did claim it in their own unique aerial fashion. But it is here that the documented history ends and the enduring myth begins. For decades, speculation has swirled that the whaling story was just a cover. What were they really looking for? The legend of Neuschwabenland and its secret Base 211 was born. The theory posits that the expedition wasn't just mapping, it was searching for something specific. They were looking for a series of vast interconnected ice-free caves warmed by geothermal vents, a natural feature of Antarctica's volcanic geology that could be expanded into a hidden defensible fortress. A final redoubt, a place to retreat to and regroup if the war in Europe turned against them. For years, this remained a fringe conspiracy theory, a wild piece of wartime lore. But the story received a massive injection of credibility in the months following Germany's surrender in 1945. Long after the war in Europe was over, 2 German U-boats, U-530 and U-977, made separate astonishing journeys across the Atlantic and surrendered to the Argentine authorities in the port of Mar del Plata. They arrived in July and August 1945, more than 2 months after the cessation of hostilities. Their appearance sparked a media frenzy. Why were they so late? Where had they been? The crews were interrogated, but their stories were vague. Their logs were missing, and they claimed to have simply been hiding out at sea, unwilling to surrender. This is where historians still debate the facts. The mainstream view is that the U-boat crews were simply desperate men, likely trying to avoid capture by the Soviets and seeking refuge in a country known to have some Nazi sympathies. But the mysterious circumstances, the missing logs, the extreme length of their journey, and the rumors that they had jettisoned cargo and possibly even passengers before arriving, provided fertile ground for a far more elaborate theory. The story quickly spread that these submarines were the last elements of a secret convoy. Their real mission it was whispered, was to ferry high-ranking Nazi officials advanced technology, or even Hitler himself, to the secret base in Neuschwabenland. They had completed their mission in the Antarctic, and only then proceeded to Argentina to surrender. The myth of the Antarctic fortress was no longer just a theory. It now had a potential tangible link to the last unaccounted-for remnants of the Third Reich. It was a story too compelling to die, and it would soon provoke a massive and equally mysterious response from the victorious Allied powers. The end of the Second World War should have brought a sense of quiet to the world. Instead, it marked the beginning of a tense new standoff, the Cold War. And in this uneasy peace, the United States military turned its attention and its immense resources to the bottom of the world. What followed was, and remains, the largest expedition ever sent to Antarctica, an operation so massive and shrouded in conflicting stories that it has become a cornerstone of the entire Antarctic conspiracy narrative. You are now in the Southern Ocean in the austral summer of 1946. But this is no lone science vessel. You are part of a full-scale naval task force. 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, submarines, icebreakers, and supply vessels. On board are 4,700 men, Marines, sailors, and scientists. The fleet is equipped with helicopters, seaplanes, and a vast array of military hardware. This is Operation High Jump. Officially, the mission's objectives were clear and sensible. It was designated the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program. Its stated goals were to train personnel and test military equipment in frigid conditions to consolidate and extend U.S. sovereignty over the largest practicable area of the Antarctic continent, and to carry out scientific research, particularly aerial mapping. The Cold War context is crucial here. The U.S. and the Soviet Union were already eyeing each other warily, and the polar regions offering the shortest flight paths between the two superpowers were seen as potential new theaters of conflict. Testing gear and men in the Antarctic was a logical, if massive, undertaking. Think of it as the world's most extreme winter training exercise. The expedition was a marvel of logistics and ambition. Over the summer of 1946-47, its aircraft flew hundreds of missions mapping an estimated 1.5 million square miles of territory, including a significant portion of the coastline and vast swathes of the unknown interior. They discovered new mountain ranges, new islands, and corrected major errors on existing maps. It was by any measure a stunning success in terms of exploration and data collection. But then things got strange. The operation was planned to last for 6 to 8 months. The official reason given was the early and unexpectedly harsh onset of the Antarctic winter, which was making flight operations too dangerous. And indeed, the mission was not without tragedy. The most famous incident was the crash of the George I, a PBM-5 Martin Mariner seaplane. It went down during a blizzard, and while 3 men perished, 6 others were miraculously rescued after surviving for 13 days on the ice shelf. This incident is a documented fact and is often cited as evidence of the perilous conditions that led to the early withdrawal. However, to a suspicious mind, the official explanation felt thin. A naval task force of this size planned for months, pulling out so suddenly, it seemed unlikely. The rumors began almost as soon as the fleet returned. Whispers of a different kind of engagement, a secret battle. This is where the story takes a sharp turn into high strangeness, fueled by unverified reports and a document of dubious authenticity. The central piece of this puzzle is the so-called secret diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the famed polar explorer, who was the officer in charge of Operation High Jump. This diary, which first surfaced decades after his passing, tells a fantastical story. In it, Byrd allegedly describes flying his plane beyond the South Pole and discovering a vast temperate green valley hidden within the ice. The air was warm, the rivers flowed, and he saw creatures resembling mammoths grazing on the hillsides. His plane was then intercepted by strange disc-shaped flying craft that escorted him down to a landing. There, he was met by representatives of a highly advanced subterranean civilization who called themselves the Ariani, living in a city called Agartha. These beings, the diary claims, were concerned about humanity's recent development of nuclear weapons. They had been observing humanity for a long time, and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had forced them to intervene. They delivered a warning to Byrd to take back to the surface world. Humanity must abandon its weapons of war, or it would face self-destruction. Byrd was then escorted back to his plane and returned to the main base, his experience logged as a secret. This diary has been almost universally dismissed by mainstream historians as a complete fabrication, a piece of pulp fiction created long after the fact. Byrd's official logs and the accounts of other expedition members contain nothing of the sort. And yet, the story is incredibly potent. It fuses the existing myth of a Nazi base with the much older legends of a hollow earth and the subterranean kingdom of Agartha. It also provides a stunningly dramatic explanation for Operation High Jump's early retreat. In this version of events, the U.S. Navy didn't just encounter harsh weather. They encountered a technologically superior force, whether Nazi remnants armed with exotic technology, the inhabitants of Agartha, or some combination of the two. They were, the story goes, decisively defeated and warned away from the continent. This tale, however fictional, perfectly explained the fleet's hasty departure and set the stage for decades of speculation about what or who might be guarding the secrets of the ice. The story of Admiral Byrd's supposed encounter with a subterranean civilization, as wild as it sounds, did not emerge from a vacuum. It tapped into a rich vein of myth and speculation that had been growing for years, blending post-war anxieties, occult beliefs, and the very real advancements in German technology. To understand the persistent UFO legends of Antarctica, you have to trace these threads back to their source. Your journey now takes you to the shadowy world of German occultism in the 1920s and 30s. Long before the Nazis came to power, secret societies like the Thule Society and the Vril Society were exploring esoteric ideas about lost Aryan homelands, ancient super races, and mystical energies. The Vril Society in particular was said to be in contact with an alien civilization channeling designs for revolutionary new technologies. This is the stuff of historical footnotes and esoteric lore, a quirky tidbit of pre-war German mysticism. But according to a certain strain of conspiracy theory, these mystical pursuits were not just philosophical. They were the secret theoretical engine behind the Third Reich's most advanced and secret weapons programs. When the war ended, and Allied investigators began sifting through the technological remnants of the regime, they were stunned by what they found. German scientists had developed the first jet fighters, the first cruise missiles, and the first ballistic missiles. They were years ahead of the Allies in many areas. This is a mainstream historical fact. The US and the Soviet Union immediately scrambled to capture this knowledge and the scientists who possessed it. The American program to recruit these experts was called Operation Paperclip, which brought over 1,600 German scientists engineers, and technicians to work on American military and aerospace projects. The most famous of these was Wernher von Braun, the architect of the V-2 rocket, who would go on to become the architect of the Saturn V rocket that took American astronauts to the moon. But the legend insists that the jets and rockets were only the public face of German research. The real secrets, the truly revolutionary technologies, were kept hidden. This is where the stories of the Haunebu and Vril flying discs come from. These were allegedly anti-gravity craft powered by esoteric Vril energy developed in secret underground facilities and possibly tested in the final desperate days of the war. According to the lore, the plans for these craft, and perhaps even a few working prototypes, were smuggled out of Germany and taken to the secret base in Neuschwabenland. This narrative neatly explains the origin of the flying saucers that Admiral Byrd supposedly encountered. They weren't from Agartha. They were the Nazi superweapons that had been perfected in their icy hideout. This theory creates a compelling alternative timeline for the post-war era. While the public was being introduced to the idea of flying saucers from other planets after sightings like Kenneth Arnold's in 1947, the secret the theory goes was that these craft were man-made. The entire alien narrative was a sophisticated piece of disinformation designed to cover up a terrestrial technological struggle. The Cold War in the skies was not just between the US and the Soviets, but with this holdout Nazi faction in Antarctica. As we move into the satellite era, the nature of the evidence changes. The hunt for UFOs in Antarctica moves from alleged encounters to the patient meticulous scanning of satellite imagery. Google Earth becomes the primary tool of the modern anomaly hunter, and the finds are fascinating if ambiguous. A long, straight gouge in the snow miles, long ends in a strange, disturbed area, presented as a UFO crash trail. A perfectly oval-shaped structure, half buried in the ice, is labeled an alien craft. A rock formation on a mountainside, when viewed from the right angle and with the right shadows, seems to form a massive humanoid face in the snow. A tabular iceberg breaks off from a glacier in a shape that looks uncannily like a massive ocean liner or battleship, and is immediately dubbed a frozen ghost ship. Scientists are quick to provide rational and usually quite elegant explanations for these images. The crash trail is most likely a simple avalanche scar from a piece of a collapsing glacier. The oval structure is a sastrugi, a natural wave-like ridge of snow formed by the wind. The face is a classic example of pareidolia, our brain's talent for finding patterns. The ship is just a coincidence of how ice fractures, and yet the images themselves, stripped of context, are powerful. They speak to our desire to find order in the chaos, to find something extraordinary in the mundane. The continent does offer up genuine unexplained oddities that seem to blur the line. For instance, the discovery of mummified seals perfectly preserved by the dry, cold air found miles inland and thousands of feet up in the mountains of the dry valleys, far from their natural ocean habitat. How did they get there? Some theories suggest they became disoriented and simply wandered inland until they perished. Others propose that they were carried there on floating ice during a past era when sea levels were much higher, or that they were entombed in ice near the coast and carried inland by the slow, grinding movement of the glaciers over thousands of years. But for a storyteller, they are one more piece of high strangeness, another unsettling mystery in a land already full of them. The skies over Antarctica, once filled with the imagined specters of Nazi flying discs and the real-world engines of Operation Highjump's naval aircraft, fall silent. The era of overt military posturing on the ice comes to a sudden and perplexing end. What replaces it is in the context of the times even more unbelievable than a secret base. What replaces it is peace. You are now in Washington, D.C., in the year 1959. The Cold War is at its absolute peak. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in a bitter ideological struggle, building nuclear arsenals capable of ending all life on Earth. School children are practicing duck and cover drills. Paranoia is the default state of global politics. In this climate of extreme hostility and mistrust, the 12 nations then active in Antarctica, including the USA and the USSR, sit down together and sign a document of unprecedented cooperation, the Antarctic Treaty. This treaty is a genuine marvel of diplomacy, a historical fact that seems to defy the logic of its own time. In just 14 short articles, it lays out a revolutionary framework for governing an entire continent. First, it declares that Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only. All military bases, fortifications, maneuvers, and weapons testing are forbidden. Second, it explicitly bans any nuclear explosions and the disposal of radioactive waste, making Antarctica the world's first nuclear-free zone. This was the first major arms control agreement of the Cold War era signed, while the two superpowers were actively pointing missiles at each other. Third, it guarantees the freedom of scientific investigation and mandates that all nations must share their scientific plans, observations, and results, making them freely available to all. And perhaps most crucially, it addresses the thorny issue of territorial claims. 7 nations had already laid claim to pie-shaped wedges of the continent, some of them overlapping and contested. The treaty didn't erase these claims, but it froze them indefinitely. It states that no new claims can be made and that existing claims cannot be enlarged while the treaty is in force. It effectively put the entire continent under a unique form of international management belonging to no one and to everyone at the same time. From a mainstream historical perspective, the treaty was a triumph of scientific rationalism over political squabbling. Its origins lay in the International Geophysical Year of 1957-58, a massive coordinated global scientific effort that saw unprecedented cooperation between East and West. The scientists who worked together in Antarctica during the International Geophysical Year became powerful advocates for preserving the continent as a peaceful international laboratory. They successfully lobbied their governments, arguing that the scientific value of Antarctica was too great to be squandered in a geopolitical turf war. It is held up as a shining model of what humanity can achieve when it chooses reason and cooperation over conflict. But now, lean in a little closer and look at this same treaty through a different lens, the lens of suspicion. From this perspective, the Antarctic Treaty is not a model of peace. It's the architecture of a cover-up. Think about the timing. Just a decade after Operation Highjump allegedly encountered a superior force and was forced into a hasty retreat, the world's most powerful nations suddenly agree to completely demilitarize the entire continent and strictly control all access to it. Why? The alternative theory is chillingly simple. The treaty was not an agreement between the nations of the world. It was a truce. It was an armistice signed after a secret war that humanity had lost. The superpowers, having realized they could not defeat or dislodge the occupants of Antarctica, whether they were a Nazi remnant with advanced technology, a subterranean civilization, or something else entirely, did the only thing they could. They negotiated a surrender. The treaty in this view is a quarantine. It's an agreement to leave the others alone, and in return, the others would not interfere with the surface world. Suddenly, the treaty's articles take on a darker meaning. The ban on military activity isn't about promoting peace. It's about preventing any single nation from trying to attack the hidden power again. The ban on nuclear weapons isn't about arms control. It's about not provoking an entity with vastly superior technology. The freezing of territorial claims isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about acknowledging that no nation has any real sovereignty there anyway. The clause that requires the sharing of all scientific data, a way for the signatory nations to monitor each other and ensure no one is making secret breakthroughs by studying the phenomenon. And what about access? Today, the treaty system, which has grown to include over 50 nations, tightly regulates all human activity. To mount an independent expedition requires navigating a labyrinth of permits and environmental impact assessments. Air traffic is restricted to specific corridors. Large areas are designated as specially protected areas off limits to almost everyone. To the scientific community, these are essential measures to protect a fragile and unique ecosystem. To a conspiratorial mind, they are a system of control designed to keep people away from sensitive areas, to prevent a private citizen with a plane and a camera from accidentally stumbling upon a pyramid, a doorway, or the entrance to a subterranean city. The treaty transformed Antarctica into the most pristine and protected wilderness on Earth. The enduring question is, what exactly is it protecting? And who is it protecting it from? The Great Antarctic Treaty, a document born of Cold War paranoia and scientific hope, effectively turned the continent into a planetary preserve. But the quarantine you might be imagining, a cordon to keep a hidden civilization in, has been inverted. The most intense security measures in Antarctica today are not designed to keep secrets from getting out, but to stop intruders from getting in. An invasion is in fact underway. It's just not the one you're thinking of. The aliens have arrived, but they don't come in silver discs. They come in the tread of a boot, in the ballast water of a ship, or clinging to a crate of fresh vegetables. You are now inside one of the dozens of permanent research stations that dot the continent's coastline. It's a world of gleaming stainless steel humming machinery and the constant hiss of filtered air. Here in this isolated bubble of human ingenuity, biosecurity is paramount. Before anyone arrives, their clothing and equipment are meticulously cleaned, inspected, and sometimes irradiated to kill any stray seed spores or insects. The goal is to keep Antarctica as it has been for millions of years, a pristine, isolated laboratory. But the defenses are not perfect. Your attention is drawn to a brightly lit room, a splash of vibrant green against the sterile white of the station. This is the hydroponics unit, a place of incredible psychological importance, providing the only fresh salad and vegetables the crew will see for an entire year. And in 2014, at Australia's Davis Station, this little oasis became ground zero for a full-scale biological breach. The enemy? Springtails, tiny six-legged arthropods, also known as collembolans. They are harmless in a normal garden, but in the hermetically sealed world of an Antarctic station, they were an ecological catastrophe. The entire hydroponic facility was overrun. It was a slow-motion salad bar apocalypse. The station was forced to declare a biological emergency, and the entire unit had to be shut down, dismantled, and sterilized from top to bottom. This wasn't an isolated incident. The continent has been fighting off these tiny invaders for decades. In what is perhaps the most stubbornly persistent, and quirky infestation story. One station's sewage system became the home for a thriving population of a species of mushroom fly, Lycoriella ingenua. For 2 decades, they resisted every attempt at eradication breeding in the warm, nutrient-rich environment of the waste processing plant. It's a humbling and slightly disgusting reminder that even in the coldest place on Earth, life, especially the annoying kind, finds a way. That's probably not a story the station manager puts in the recruitment brochure. The threat isn't just on land. The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the fastest warming places on the planet. As its coastal waters warm, they become more hospitable to outsiders. The hulls of the increasing number of tourist and supply ships that visit the region act as taxis for marine hitchhikers. Mussels, crabs, and other coastal species from South America can survive the journey, and if they find a suitable spot, they can establish a foothold. An ecosystem that has evolved in splendid isolation for millions of years has no natural defense against these newcomers. A single invasive species could theoretically unravel the entire food web, a biological chain reaction that could be far more devastating than any military maneuver. This has led to a constant and evolving debate among the scientists and nations that manage the continent. How do you build a foolproof biosecurity shield for a place that is seeing more and more human traffic? The Antarctic Treaty System has been supplemented with robust environmental protocols, but enforcing them across dozens of national programs and a growing commercial tourism industry is a monumental challenge. Researchers are currently debating the most effective strategies, from advanced chemical cleaning of ship hulls to developing genetic tools to track the origin of any new arrivals. So the Great Antarctic Invasion is real. It's a silent, creeping biological warfare, waged not with advanced craft, but with the mundane stuff of our own world. These organisms are alien in the truest biological sense. They do not belong. They are life from one world, our noisy, interconnected, and messy one arriving in another, which has been defined by its silence and isolation. The consequences of these two worlds meeting are unpredictable and potentially irreversible. The treaty may have stopped nations from fighting over Antarctica, but it is now the front line in a much more fundamental battle, a struggle to protect an ancient frozen world from the relentless encroachment of our own. As the planet warms, this battle is only going to intensify, and the ice itself is beginning to show signs of surrender. The invasion of the tiny springtails and mushroom flies, you now realize, was just a prelude, a minor skirmish before the main assault. The greatest invasion Antarctica now faces is not biological, but thermal. It is an invasion of warmth, a slow, relentless, and invisible siege that is causing the frozen continent to crack and weep. You are standing on the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, that long curving arm that reaches up towards South America, and you can hear the sound. It's a deep, thunderous groan, followed by a crack that sounds like a celestial lightning bolt. An immense wall of ice, a glacier front that has been stable for 10,000 years, begins to calve. A skyscraper of ice, weighing millions of tons, topples in slow motion into the sea, sending a tidal wave surging across the bay. This is the front line. The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the most rapidly warming places on the planet, its average temperature having risen by nearly 3 degrees Celsius in the last 50 years. For comparison, the global average is around 1 degree. This is climate change in hyperdrive. The effects are not theoretical. They are visible and they are dramatic. Glaciers are in full retreat, pulling back and exposing land that hasn't seen the sun since the last ice age. The ice shelves, those massive floating platforms of ice that buttress the glaciers, are disintegrating. You may remember the Larsen B ice shelf, which shattered in 2002. An area the size of a small country collapsed into the ocean in just over a month. This is more than just a local phenomenon. It is a warning. Antarctica, which holds 90% of the world's ice, is the great sleeping giant of sea level rise. While the East Antarctic ice sheet is relatively stable for now, its western counterpart is a cause for grave concern. The West Antarctic ice sheet is grounded on bedrock that lies far below sea level, making it inherently unstable. As warming ocean water nibbles away at its underside, it risks a runaway collapse. Scientists continue to debate the exact timeline, whether it will take centuries or if we could cross an irreversible tipping point much sooner. But they agree on the consequences. A full collapse of just this one section of the ice sheet could over time add more than 3 meters or 10 feet to global sea levels. A joke about selling your beach house now seems a little less funny. And yet, in this story of loss and retreat, there is a strange and paradoxical rebirth. As the ice melts, parts of Antarctica are beginning to turn green again. Along the coastal fringes of the peninsula, hardy mosses and lichens are spreading rapidly, covering the newly exposed ground in patches of vivid green and black. 2 native species of flowering plant, the Antarctic hairgrass and pearlwort, are booming. For the first time in millions of years, a ghost of that fossil forest you imagined is beginning to stir. The potential for this greening has led to some remarkable, almost science-fictional proposals. Scientists are studying whether by the end of this century, select sheltered areas of the peninsula might become warm enough for small-scale agriculture. They aren't talking about vast fields of wheat, but perhaps hardy crops, like certain types of barley, or potatoes could be grown in protected plots. The continent's wildlife is responding too. Gentoo penguins, which prefer open water, are thriving and expanding their colonies southward, moving into territory once dominated by the ice-loving Adelie penguins. The continent is changing before our very eyes. And here at the end of our journey is the final greatest revelation of Antarctica. For a century, we have projected our own myths onto its blank surface. We looked for pyramids, for doorways, for Nazi bases, and subterranean cities. We searched for a hidden history, a lost civilization, an answer to the mysteries of our past. It was an archive of air trapped in the ice itself. The real oracle was never a being from Agartha. It was the climate data preserved in the ice cores, a perfect million-year record of our planet's pulse. As the ice cracks and melts, it is revealing our future, not our past. The warming, the greening, the collapse. This is the continent's final message. It is a forecast for the rest of the planet. Antarctica's greatest mystery is not what lies hidden beneath its ice, but what the loss of that ice will mean for us all. And so our long journey to the bottom of the world drifts towards its end. The roar of the calving glaciers softens, fading into a gentle hum in the back of your mind. The stark geometric shape of the pyramid in the Ellsworth Mountains dissolves back into the soft focus of a satellite image, just another shadow on the ice. The lurid red of bloodfalls pales, becoming just another mineral stain on a distant rock face. You can feel the profound cold of the continent begin to recede, replaced by the familiar warmth of your own room. All the great and unsettling questions of ancient maps of secret bases, of strange disc-shaped craft in the polar sky, can be set aside for now. They are stories for the waking world to puzzle over, Tonight you have journeyed through a world of contradictions, a place of both scientific wonder and spectacular myth, a continent that holds the memory of a green past and the starkest warnings for our future. But now that vast white landscape can simply be a place of quiet. Let the silence of the polar plateau settle over you, a silence so deep and so complete it absorbs all worry, all thought. Let the slow, patient rhythm of the ice breathing with the tides over millennia guide your own breath, drawing it deeper, slower, and calmer. The mysteries will still be there tomorrow. For now, there is only the quiet, the darkness, and the gentle pull of sleep.